Okay, and now it is the moment you've all been waiting for. Okay, there's going to be more interaction again. We are going to talk about that International Journal of Sport Communication editorial that we had you read for today's class. This was more of a fun piece, so I hope you enjoyed reading it. I know it was a heck of a lot shorter than any of the other write-ups that I've been talking about now would have been. So at the very least, we can appreciate that. But I'm not going to like quiz you all on if you read the fine print or if you remember all the details. What I really want to talk to you all about with this piece is just whether or not my position holds, right? So I made some predictions and I want to know your opinion on those predictions, essentially. So I wrote this piece at the very beginning of the pandemic when everyone was on lockdown, at home, alone, right? Total isolation. And I noticed that people, including professional athletes, were trying to come up with ways to occupy themselves. So my estimate was that the relationship between athletes and their fans would actually become more of a two-way relationship because of how athletes were gravitating towards social media engagement with their fans at that time. So my question for you is really just, what do you all think? Did you see that happen beyond the way that I described it in the editorial? Do you think I'm totally full of it? Was that not something that you noticed? What's your take on fan athlete interaction during the pandemic?
So when I read it, you mentioned that I forgot who the athlete was, but he would like invite people to have like a talent show, and I thought that was not like I thought that was like very smart of him to not only keep himself entertained, but like the fans as well, and making sure the fans don't like continue to stay fans. They also got to learn about it. So I thought that was a good idea from him. Yeah.
Right, right. So you agree that that probably drove their relationship a bit closer, was definitely more two-way because he was heavily engaging with them all. He was talking to them directly. He was acknowledging live comments. What else?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think especially about the part where it talks about like Steph Curry and how he like did all these Instagram live videos where he like included I guess like different athletes, and they kind of talked about how they were all like, pretty much going through the same thing and like they were all coping together. I think that brought a lot of like unity with the fans as well because you have that similar aspect of like, oh, we're all going through it together, like whether you're this pro athlete or you're just like a spectator of the sport. It kind of brought the two things together.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the pandemic had this humanizing effect on athletes in general. And then we saw certain athletes like Steph Curry, for example, really capitalize on that, take advantage of it, and identify with their fans, which is something that's pretty rare, right? Usually it's the fans that are trying to identify with the athletes. But in this case, we kind of saw a role reversal almost. What else?
I think this might have been after you wrote the paper, but like Kyrie Irving also used like the Instagram Live platform to like kind of talk about his controversies, and because he's kind of very controversial, and then like also interviews fellow players to like get like that view, the media that doesn't really cover of Kyrie Irving and like people around him. So I thought like some like athletes really leverage the platform well to show them show fans another side of them.
Absolutely. And I think this is a great example. This particular case of Kyrie Irving, there were some fans that were really outraged by some of the things that he had been doing before the pandemic, and it felt like he was a distraction to the team or, to the sport in certain ways. And so just like we talked about with my study before, even though he's not necessarily advocating for an activist effort, he's still appealing to fans in a way that, they're going to be a little bit neutralized, right? Because what you're talking about is him getting up on his Instagram Live and telling stories, right? So he's providing narratives. He's probably appealing to emotion. I don't know if he had any humor appeals or not, but he's exposing fans to this alternate kind of framing of what was going on with him beyond how it was presented by media, which is really important for identification. So that's a great observation as well.
one thing I found interesting when you were talking about predictions was at the end you predicted that as competition resumes, fans and or athletes won't be as active on social media anymore. And so now, like seeing, you know, a year and a half later with competition resuming, I think that that does hold true in one way. Like, I think the athletes themselves have definitely reduced the amount of interaction that they've had with their fans. However, I think the organizations that they're a part of and the teams that they're a part of have seen how successful it is and have pushed that on their end. So doing like behind the scenes interviews and like fun games with the athletes and stuff like that. So it kind of feels like that interaction never left.
Absolutely. Okay, I love that you said that, because that was actually going to be my next question for you all, was having to do with those predictions that I made, whether or not they held up and what you've noticed. And I think that that's a really insightful takeaway. It's something that I mentioned in the piece as well, is that hopefully the organizations will kind of take note and continue to cater to fans so that the absence is not felt. And I think it's a beautiful thing that you've noticed that some organizations have been able to do that pretty seamlessly. Does anyone else have any thoughts on those predictions at the end, whether or not they held up? Have you noticed a drop off in fan athlete interaction? Do you think even if the organizations didn't kind of pick up that slack for the athletes, that it would matter? Would fans get upset, or do you think they'd be just recharged enough by the interaction that they got during the pandemic to still feel that bond, even in its absence, once competition resumes?
So going off of like the point previously, like specifically, like I think like going off of your point with the predictions, like the Boston Bruins had like a TikTok and they really used it during the pandemic. And they kind of dropped off, and a lot of people were like, oh, like what happened? And they bugged them, and they started right back up on media day. And they really went in like on all the personal aspects of the players, and there was such like a high level of fan engagement, and people were really responding and happy. So I think even if the players aren't doing it again themselves, they love to see the behind the scenes with the organizations, because it still gives them a look into the personal aspect of all their favorite players.
Right. Yes. Again, that connection piece is so important. And I think that that point is actually even more interesting, because we saw kind of like a drop off and then they picked it up with media day and it seems to be going okay now. So that's interesting to know that, you know, maybe fans didn't feel betrayed necessarily, or if they did, it was quick to remedy. And as long as, you know, organizations are keeping this interaction alive on behalf of athletes, maybe fans are satisfied. That's insightful.
Yeah, I think like the COVID pandemic was a good introduction for a lot of athletes into this these platforms. For
Yeah.
example, one really prominent basketball player on social media I think of is JaVale McGee. His YouTube channel is like one of the most like informing NBA channels, because he just vlogs all day, and then you get to really see like a different side. So I think like a lot of athletes have like learned, like use this as an opportunity to like go on these platforms, and I think it's still growing actually, even after like the pandemic's kind of subsiding.
Yeah. So you've seen continued use in the case of JaVale McGee. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you all so much for bearing with me. I know that I just talked about myself a lot and about my interests a lot. So I hope that, you know, I didn't put any of you to sleep with that. I hope that at the very least, you know, I gave you some good food for thought to just kind of mull over as you continue to engage in athletics and consume athletic content in the form of either your own athletic competitions or, you know, watching the competitions of others, if it's through social media or any other variety of ways of consuming in sport. Maybe if not that, you know, I hope I gave you enough background information about myself and my interests for you to at least have a solid understanding of how I might be able to help you in your own athletic endeavors. So again, like I said at the beginning, I really, really wanted this session to be about you all and how I can help you all. And so now it is your time to shine. Okay, please don't